Hi everyone, Scott here to talk more about the Tone Enhancer filter in Perfect Effects 8. In the last video, I covered all the sliders in this filter. This video is all about the tone curve. The tone curve gives you very fine control over the tonal ranges in your photo. So let's start with the basics. How do we read the tone curve? The lower left corner is pure blacks, the shadows. The upper right corner is your pure whites, the highlights. The axes emphasize this too. The gradient bars start at black in the lower left corner and progress to white along both axes. I like to relate the curve to the histogram. Shadows are on the left, highlights are on the right, and everything else is in between. When I read the tone curve, I mentally divide it into 4 columns. From left to right, there's the shadows, lower midtones, the upper midtones, and the highlights. Let's start with a classic S-curve adjustment. I'll click in the darker tones about a quarter way up the curve and bring that curve down slightly. Then another click and drag about 3/4 of the way up and push that and boost up those highlights. There's this gentle S-shaped curve. Notice how the S-curve affects the histogram. As we saw with the levels control in the previous video, the histogram expands so the blacks push a little closer to the left edge, pure black, and the whites push out to the right edge, pure white. For very granular control of the tones, you can set points on the curve. You can click on the curve to set a point. You can set as many points as you like, although usually only a few are necessary. Now, points on the curve serve 2 purposes. One is a point of control to alter the tones in the image, and the other is an anchor to protect tones in the image. So here I've set 2 points, one down in my lower black area and one in the upper right corner toward the highlights. Those are going to be my anchors. Now I'm going to create that S-curve again. I'm going to pull down the shadows a little bit, and I'm going to push up the highlights a little bit. And notice that the areas of the curve beyond my anchor points aren't changing. Those are staying the same. I'm protecting the shadows and I'm protecting the highlights here. Thus far, we've been working with the RBG channel, all the tones, the luminance. There are also individual curves for red, green, and blue, and each can be manipulated differently and uniquely. These are useful to address overall color issues in your photo or for artistic styling, like vintage effects, for example. So let's suppose I want less blues in this image. So in the blue channel, I'll click and drag the curve down, pulling it down just a little bit, taking away the blues. The blues are de-emphasized, and the photo takes on a yellowish cast. Yellow is the opposite of blue on the color wheel. And the reverse, if I push the blues up, the image becomes more blue, and the foreground, where I had more of those yellow tones in the concrete and sand, they're all but disappearing. The red and the green channels work the same way. The red controls the balance of reds versus cyans, and the green channel controls the tug-of-war between green and magenta. To drive this home, let's take a closer look at what the Midtone Contrast Boost preset is doing. This preset doesn't change any sliders, it's only manipulating the tone curve. The preset has set several anchor points to lock down the dark shadows and lock the bright highlights, just like I did previously. And there's a smaller S-curve that also uses an anchor point in the middle to really pivot on that midpoint and keep that fixed. That is the tone curve in a nutshell. It's a very powerful tool in the Tone Enhancer filter. If you haven't watched the previous video with the overview of all the Tone Enhancer sliders, have a look at that, because these 2 videos together will lay the groundwork for several more upcoming videos on the Tone Enhancer and how this filter is used to solve common post-processing problems and produce unique looks for your imagery. Stay tuned.